this because of low GnRH or even, low LH and FSH, okay? And then easily or fatigue easily, that means become tired easily. Then reduce muscle power, feeling cold, then severe headache. Then this one seems to progress to constantly cannot see object on the side. And finally, when you go and check out, basically she is having hypotensive and also slow pulse. Okay, so these are the complaints, the signs, symptoms that you can see in the patient. So the case summary we actually given to you to make sure that you can actually do on the case. So you look at the case summary, basically is panhyperthyroidism due to non-secretory tumor, which the optic chiasma. Okay, so how does that actually related to the sign symptom you see in the patient? Okay, so this the first issue is basically what would be your differential diagnosis suggest in the patient that is suffering. So most common one, I don't know, you actually have this list of differential diagnosis. The one that I can come out is basically traumatic brain injury. And these are usually what people will ask first because trauma are commonly happening. So you will put that as the first one. And then the second one, you probably look at gonadotropin deficiency, maybe craniopharyngioma. So this is related to tumor. Shinhan syndrome, Ray syndrome, Simon syndrome, even hypogonadism, adrenal insufficiency, there is Addison disease. You also probably look at diabetes insipidus. Then finally, you probably come up with panhypopituitarism. So the second question that you will ask is history taking related to the differential diagnosis. So anything that related to the trauma, you will probably ask about does she actually fall and hurt her head? Is there any recent surgery done on the pituitary hypothalamus or any major surgery on the head? Okay, and then related to Singhan syndrome, you probably will ask, is she actually giving childbirth? But she is already 52, so it's probably unlikely to give birth. Any other complication during the childbirth. So you can list a lot of other history that related to the case that you have listed out or differential diagnosis that you have listed out. Yeah? Okay, so we ask you to draw, but in this online learning, probably it's much easier for you to just copy paste from the internet. So these are the pictures that you have. So we ask you to label the and also over here you can actually see it. Yeah. Okay, so then sketch so how the picture related to optic nerve. So you can see here the optic chiasma. Okay, another one here you can actually see the optic chiasma, which is actually above the pituitary gland and below that, basically above the pituitary glands. Okay, so anything, if there's any enlargement or any growth, is going to compress onto them. If there's an upward growth, because the only way the pituitary can grow or tumor that can grow is basically going upward, because going down is actually blocked by the bony structure, so it can actually go in further down. So it can only go forward, so it's going to compress onto the optic chiasma. Okay, wait for the next slide to. Can you give me like 10 minutes? I try to get the internet to connect directly using the wire. Just wait for a while. Yeah?
All right, okay.
Hello. Sorry, I think you should be able to connect directly using wire. Okay, should be able to load faster. Okay, so we look at second question. Everyone still around?
Yes, Doctor.
Okay, we look at the second question. They ask you to draw, describe the vascular structures system of the hypothalamus and explain the significant capillary plexuses and also the second capillary plexuses. So this is where the arterial supply coming in. There's a superior hypophyseal artery, okay, that form the first or primary capillary plexuses, okay. This is where all this releasing hormone is secreted by the hypothalamus and transported through the portal vein, and then from there it distributes through all the thyrotropes, all the tropes in the anterior pituitary for the action of the releasing hormones. Okay, so this is where it releases the primary the releasing hormone here. Okay, and then it go to the tropes on the anterior pituitary. Okay, so the question is justify answer again indicate the factor that is influence the hypothalamic hormones release. So the factors that in module 2, so basically the limbic system, emotion, okay, any visceral, okay, or even substances that is present in the blood, all this will be integrated in the hypothalamus to basically affect the releasing hormones that is being released from the hypothalamus. Okay, then so it depends on the external factors. There's the interoceptors, basically your sight, the smell, taste, everything, or pain, even temperature can influence the hypothalamus function. Okay, and then you have there's external. The internal are basically the temperature or osmolarity of the ECF can influence hypothalamic function. Okay, then the third question is basically to draw and demonstrate the endocrinological relationship between hypothalamus, pituitary, and other organs. So this is another picture to be. So I see if I can get to the next one. Okay. So question 3. Sorry. Okay, so you can actually label the hypothalamus, anterior pituitary, posterior, and all this. These are all being labeled. Actually, you can easily now get it from the internet. So you can actually show you and where are the location of all the important organ and structures. Yeah. So I just move on, and then you can compare and contrast the relation between the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary. The hypothalamus relation with the pituitary is basically, why is it the slide move? Okay, come back again. Okay, the hypothalamus relationship between this and the anterior pituitary are basically releasing the hormone, the portal vein. This is where it influence when you go to the secondary capillary processes and influence the cell in the anterior pituitary to actually function. So if there's anything wrong to this area, the stop is there's a compression or even reduce in blood supply, it can actually affect the anterior pituitary cell function. Okay. Number 4, list the neurohormone secreted by the hypothalamus. I went to some groups and you were thinking, is hypothalamus secreting neurohormones? You were discussing yes, and some say no because you were not very sure. In actual fact, hypothalamus is basically composed of neurons or the cell body of the neuron. So whatever they secreted from the nerve or the neuron, basically they are hormones. They are neurohormones or neurotransmitters. But when it released, but it's released from the neuron, so you call them as neurohormones.
Doctor?
Okay? Yes.
I have a question. For the relationship between the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the organs, can you talk about the axis, like the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis, the thyroid axis, etc.
Okay, you can also do that, talking about the axis. Okay, but that usually when the axis is actually going further down to the third structures, which means that from here, hypothalamus, pituitary, now you're going further down to other organs like, let's say, thyroid glands. So you become a thyroid, hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid axis. Okay, but what we are asking here is basically, sorry, what we are asking here. Yeah, here we are asking only the relations between hypothalamus and pituitary and anterior pituitary. Okay, so the relation is basically it being transported down to the second capillary plexuses. Okay, it doesn't really directly releasing hormones onto the cell of the anterior pituitary. Okay, compared to the hypothalamus and posterior pituitary, the relationship is basically a direct, because all these magnocellular that form the hormones is in the cell body of the nuclei. Okay, and this hormone will be transported down through the axon and finally released at the posterior pituitary. So at the end of the axon, the nerve terminus, from there it released directly into the circulation, and from there it will be transported out to the systemic circulation. Okay, so the release of the posterior pituitary hormones is actually directly from hypothalamus through the axon, and then before released into the circulation. Okay, so the difference between anterior pituitary and posterior pituitary, the relationship is basically one, it had to be released to the capillary plexuses, only one single capillary plexuses. Okay, and these hormones basically form in the cell body of the hypothalamus for posterior pituitary. Okay, whereas in the hypothalamus, it actually works on the anterior pituitary cell by releasing hormones. Okay, and these releasing hormones, we know that they can be stimulating or can be inhibiting. Okay, Jana, any other questions?
Yeah, sorry, doctor.
Yeah, did I answer your questions that you asked?
Yeah, it's just I got confused because before that part it said including the organs. That's why I was asking.
Okay, so we move on to the fourth one. List the hormones secreted by the hypothalamus. So this is actually very good pictures to basically tell you all the hormones that is released, neurohormones that is secreted by the hypothalamus, and these are all can describe, they are basically all protein hormones or peptide hormones. Okay, which cell of the pituitary do these neurohormones act? So when they act on particular cell, which is the tropes, that means they become TRH, so it's thyroid releasing hormones, they basically act on thyroid tropes only. Okay, if they're releasing GnRH, gonadal releasing hormones, they actually act on the gonadotropes. And the CRH, cortical releasing hormones, they act on corticotropes. Okay, then you have somatostatin and then growth hormone and dopamine. The only thing about leptotropes is constantly actually producing the hormones and stored in the granules. The only thing is it is not allowed to be released because of dopamine that is actually putting a brake on its release. If there is a problem in the stock, let's say I went back to the previous one. Okay, if there's anything happens at the pituitary stalk, basically it's going to compress the stalk, then the hormones from the hypothalamus can, and this will allow actually the leptotrope to actually release a lot of prolactin into the circulation. So it can actually cause hyperprolactinemia in this case. Okay, but ours is not that is not the problem. Okay, So do you expect briefly explain mechanism action of the hormones? So if you basically know TRH, as I said, TRH, GnRH, basically they are working on the thyrotrope, so they work on GQ, okay? CRH, somatos and GN growth hormones, they basically work through the GS, okay? And then here basically it works through GI. Here somatostatin also works through GI. Okay, so basically all the hypothalamic hormones, their receptors is actually G protein coupled receptors. Yeah, it's either inhibitory or stimulatory or the secretion of the hypothalamic hormones. Your answer is yes or no. Anyone response?
Yes.
Yes. Why you expected to see there's a change in the hypothalamic hormone secretion?
Due to negative feedback.
Because there's no negative feedback. So basically most of the hypothalamic pressure basically will increase because it cannot be negative feedback. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. And number 5, describe histology. I don't expect you to basically draw the histology, but basically you know the tropes. Okay. You can actually look at the proportion of the tropes. So it seems to be a lot somatotropes, and compare the next one, the corticotropes. Then you have the leptotropes, okay, and the gonadotropes, okay, and then finally the thyrotropes. So thyrotropes is actually very little. Yeah. Okay, so we will. Any of these cells develop into a tumor. So if you have leptotropes become a tumor, then you become leptotrope adenomas. It's going to have a lot of prolactin that is going to be released. Okay. Yeah. But all this basically account for about 4 out of 10. That means it's quite high chances of leptotrope to become a tumor cell or adenomas. Okay. So it's 4 out of 10. There's 40% chances of that. Then somatotrope is 2 out of 10. That's going to become adenoma and it's going to produce a lot of growth hormones. Okay, what happens when it happens in the children? You're going to cause gigantation. But it happens in an adult, you're going to cause acromegaly. Yeah. Then corticotropes, okay, it becomes corticotrope adenoma. That is going to secrete a lot of ACDs, but there's only 10% chances that it's going to become a tumor. Gonadotropes, thyrotropes, they are very rare. And it's very, very rare to have all the ask is, can panhyperpituitarism happens? Question answer is no. Yeah. So if leptotropes is going to produce a lot of prolactin, you have prolactinemia. Okay. Now we can compare between functional and non-functional tumor. So you know functional tumor, basically they are going to release any of these hormones that they produce. If they are corticotropes that become adenoma, so you have hyperpituitarism related to corticotropes. Okay. You cannot have panhyperpituitarism. Yeah. So the hormones that can be detected by test, blood test, and basically this tumor, you can actually do that based on the result of the from there you can actually classify them after doing the test. Now for non-functional adenoma, it basically become enlarged. Let's say it become enlarged and it will compress all the other cell in the pituitary cell that is developed, the tumor cell that is developed, it become enlarged and compressed onto the all the other cells. So basically all these cells, it become atrophy. Okay. One is probably due to, yes. Anyone?
Can we say that, let's say, non-functional adenoma, can you say it can compress the artery?
Yes, but usually, let's say if it happens to be developed on the stalk of the pituitary gland, then yes, the first thing is going to compress onto the artery and you will cause hypo secretion of the hormones, because basically there's no blood supply and all this cell is going to undergo atrophy and basically apoptosis or necrosis. Okay, it can happen. But most of the adenoma basically develop inside the anterior pituitary. So slowly this is actually pushing out. So you can see the progress of if you look at the patient history, the progress, it started. Can I just go back again? Is that okay?
Yeah, okay, doctor,
Okay.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Okay, so basically for the functional adenomas, right? It's not possible to have panhypopituitarism. Okay, noted. There's no specific reason for that, or is this something that's just?
It's naturally, it's very unlikely that all the cell, or let's say the 5 type of cell, or the 5 type of cell, yeah, they actually suddenly become adenomas and they start to grow concurrently. So it's very unlikely.
Oh, so
Okay.
there's not big cases of this, like.
No, it's very. I don't think you can see any of this case happening in your lifetime. So far, none have been reported in the. That's why when you do a Google search, it was never mentioned. Yeah, it never exists. You do a Google search, yeah, you can do a Google search and you can never.
It was non-existent. Yeah, I did.
So it can never happen. But the development of the non-functional adenoma usually in the interior of the pituitary glands, anterior pituitary, and it start to grow. Initially, probably it grow inside the anterior pituitary and start to compress all the other cell. And you can see the progress of the case patient. It started usually noting that she has irregular menses. So these are very common complaints, which means that whatever that grows is going to basically compress onto the gonadotropes and going to affect LH and FSH first. Okay, why we don't know, because that is the progress. Yeah. And then later she will start to feel basically she is getting weaker and weaker, because we know that percentage of thyroid is only 5%. It's going to basically compress onto this throat and will be less TSH is going to be released. Okay. And then she will then start to progress and finally she will start to feel headaches. Okay.
Okay, doctor, this principle of growing and compressing the other areas, it applies for both the functional and non-functional adenoma, right?
Yes, you can say that it depends on the throat. For functional adenoma, it depends on the throats that is affected. Okay, if let's say it's a thyroid throat that become which is very rare, if it happens to be thyroid throat, then you won't see the patient actually develop this symptom of muscle weakness and fatigue easily. Okay, most of the time it's a letotrope, so it's going to produce a lot of prolactin, and this is the one that is going to grow and basically it's going to compress and it start to have breast development, milk formation, and all these signs and symptoms you can see in the patient. Is that okay?
That means in your, okay, so let's say I have the electrotroph adenoma, so then my other anterior pituitary hormones will be normal, or will that be low?
Will be low. It will be compressed.
Okay.
It will be compressed. So the same process, because these are very common, 40% chances. So it's going to compress onto the gonadotropes, the thyrotropes. So you always will basically see an irregular menses as quite common. And then from there, you will start to see muscle fatigue, become cold, so become weak. So these are very common things that we can see in pituitary problems, especially functional problems, adenoma. Okay.
Okay, all right.
For non-functional, yeah. So for non-functional, basically now the throat is going to develop. It can, if it happens to be here, it compress the blood supply. But if inside, usually it happens, it start to compress all the other cell. So this is your symptom and sign that you see on the patient, and then it start to grow outward because it cannot go anymore downward. It have already compressed most of the cell. So it's going to go outward, and finally it's going to add onto the compress onto the optic chiasma. Okay, this is where the patient basically complain of not able to see, problem with the sight. Any questions? Okay.
Doctor, so they're mostly adenomas and they're not carcinomas, right?
Most of these, when you talk about glands, usually you call them adenoma, and usually they are non-malignant. Okay. It can become carcinoma unless some of the cell actually spread from other region of the blood, I mean other parts of the body, then it becomes carcinoma. And most of these are usually adenoma, and it's very rare to get carcinoma in the pituitary because it's such a small area, and by the time you actually detect carcinoma, it's already all over the body. Okay. So most of the problems, tumor that actually happens in the pituitary, or basically pituitary is basically adenomas. So either they are functional or non-functional. Okay.
So will a biopsy test be done then, or it's completely ignored, no biopsy needed?
Want to do biopsy because this is going to even cause more further damage to the patient. And usually biopsy is only done on people who are already dead. When they do post-mortem, that's the time when you take a biopsy, and incidentally you find that there is actually a pituitary adenoma. So it's an incidental findings. Okay, you can do biopsy, yes. But it's very rare people want to do that because now we have a lot of technology that you can actually confirm without having to do biopsy. Yes, Jana.
Yeah, doctor, for the double capillary bed that supplies the anterior pituitary, what exactly is the advantage of having that?
Yeah. So what is the advantage? The advantages is basically a small amount of hormones that is produced, okay, by the hypothalamus hormones. Basically, there is peripheral neuron that actually produce this. It will be secreted in the plexuses and transported down, initially down, because this need a portal wing. So only small amount of hormones is required to actually stimulate the pituitary cells to actually produce more hormones to be released. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, so it's like an amplification kind of thing.
Yes, amplification type thing, and it can actually regulate. So another way is because of the negative regulation. So whatever hormones that release here, so let's say you release TRH, TSH is going to negatively feedback onto the neurons that is releasing the hormones, which basically is very close regulation. Okay, compared to the pituitary, anterior pituitary, posterior pituitary hormone is produced and released. So it will go into the circulation. So a large quantity amount that is required to be released into the circulation, because all this will go into the circulation and then go to the liver before it actually find its organs. By the time you reach the liver, most of these have been actually broken down. Systemic circulation. So okay. And the regulation is quite difficult because it's far away. You can release a lot of hormones, and negative feedback will take a bit longer way to actually come back to actually feedback onto the magnocellular neuron. Is that okay? Jana?
Doctor, thank you.
Okay. So I think I covered this one. So can I move on to the next slide? Okay. So for question 6, you are supposed to draw a table and list down all the hormones. So if you can go back to the same thing, you can actually list it down, all the hormones, chemical nature, and the target organs. But we actually want to look at actually the pituitary hormone. So I go to the, sorry. Okay. So you can actually list down the organ and axis. So if you look at the thyroid organs, okay, adrenal, gonads, and for growth, basically for mammary gland. So the really the CRH, then gonad, GnRH, all this. So the action is on the thyrotropes, okay, for thyroid glands, and then pituitary hormone release is TSH, which actually acts onto the thyroid gland, producing thyroxine. Okay, so these are the tables that you can actually draw, or you can put it another way around. Okay, so another way I can put it is basically I just get this picture and put in to look at GRH, growth hormone. Okay, saying we look at how the negative feedback effect actually happens. As we had discussed just now, The release of GRH from the hypothalamus, that's the first hormone, GHRH that is released, is going to add on to the anterior pituitary cell. That will be your somatotropes, okay? And somatotrope is going to basically release the hormones, okay, growth hormones, and growth hormones is going to actually add on to, somatotrope, growth hormone, and growth hormone is going to add on other organs, okay? Even on the organs and become negative feedback onto the somatotropes and also onto the hypothalamus. Okay, so these are the feedback lobe. So those that are nearer, basically they are considered short lobe, and then the one further up down to the organs, they are basically the long lobes. Okay, so you can do that for all the other hormones such as GnRH. You can actually work on TRH. Yeah. So this is where, if you look at this, all this basically to list down and show you different releasing hormone from the hypothalamus and how it acts on the pituitary and what are the cells that is affected and the hormone release, and finally what is the end product from the end organs. Yeah. Okay, so we come to question 7 about panhypopituitarism. Any question before that? If not, I will just continue. Okay, so I'll just continue question 7. Talk about panhypopituitarism. As we know, panhypopituitarism is a condition due to absent production or inadequate production of anterior pituitary. Okay, and it's bringing the result of other problems that affect the pituitary glands. For our case, it's basically due to non-functional adenoma, which is compressing onto the pituitary cell. Okay, so which basically prevent it to become able to produce its own hormones. Okay, so can someone have panhypopituitarism? As I said, we have discussed just now. No. Then because it's very unlikely that all the anterior pituitary cell suddenly become a tumor. So it's very unlikely. So what about hyperpituitarism? Yes, that can be one, but it depends on the type of it happens is basically lithotropes. Okay, so you can go by the sequence. Encounter is basically lithotropes, then you have corticotropes and also somatotropes. It doesn't mean that the bigger population, there are chances of getting this more. It can also be due to the location of the cells. They are commonly found in which area, anterior part, lateral, or this can be happens. But there is, if you look at the anatomical side. So whatever that happens, it can produce excessive growth hormones. If let's say it's due to somatotropes, then growth hormone is going to increase, and then this will result in increase in growth hormones that allow pituitary gigantation to happen in children. But it happens when the person is already adult. It causes acromegaly. Okay, so I give an example. Okay, so what is a tumor and what is a if you go and Google, you can actually find it. Basically, it's any swelling or a part of a body generally without inflammation caused by abnormal growth or tissue where it's benign or malignant. Okay. And tumor actually, if you look at it, is referred to a Latin word meaning swelling. So any swelling, and which is one of the cardinal sign of inflammation. So, but it usually doesn't show any inflammation. So any swelling, you are considered tumor. Yeah. But now, literally, the word we refer to is basically in modern time. Tumor is used synonymously as a neoplasm or a solid or fluid cystic lesion that may or may not be formed by abnormal growth of neoplastic cells. So now, very commonly, we refer tumor to any neoplastic growth. So it can be either adenoma or carcinoma or benign or malignant. Yeah. So glandular origin. That means any glands that become tumor, you are basically call them adenoma. Okay, and usually they are benign. Yeah. Then it says adenoma, compare and contrast between adenoma and carcinoma. So classically, you can basically compare them. Adenoma in the glands and carcinoma in any other tissue, usually the epithelial tissue. And then adenoma are benign. The other one is malignant. And this one affect any age of people. Is rarely affect children, usually old age, because carcinoma generally happens in old age. But that may not be true. Then compare between microadenoma and macroadenoma. So anything that is less than 1 cm or 10 mm in diameter, you are considered microadenoma. Okay, and usually they are secreting adenoma. So if you look at the pituitary, usually they are secreting. Whereas macroadenoma, usually they are more than 10 mm in diameter, and usually they are non-secreting, and generally so the chances in this patient is basically a non-functional adenoma, so it's a macroadenoma. Okay. Then that other explanation to give you the details. Okay. Okay, so what do you expect to happen structurally and physiologically when there is non-functional tumor in the pituitary? Basically, it's going to compress. Okay, so non-secretory tumor would basically compress the secretory cell and the blood vessels, but the first thing is going to compress onto the secretory cell, and actually in the long run, it's going to compress on the blood vessel that supplies them. So it's going to cause hypofunction, or it can actually cause atrophy of the cell. Okay, because the space in the tulla tussica is very limited space. So it's basically easily compressing all these functional cell, the gland cell. Okay, so this is what actually gives the sign and symptoms in. So just very answer refer to case. Okay, related to blood supply to secretory cell. So you can compare this to specific form of pituitary tumor, the functional tumor. We already discussed about the functional tumor. Let's say like lithotropes, become lithotropes tumor, adenoma. So basically, this is the one that basically going to produce a lot of prolactin. Okay, and it's going to affect basically the milk, the breast development and milk production. And specific effect, okay, I already described that. Any other thing? If let's say it happens on the somatotropes, then it's going to cause gigantism in children and acromegaly in adult. Okay, which cell of pituitary benign tumor? If you Google, you can actually find this non-functional benign tumor is most of the time originate from the adenohypophyseal cell. Okay, that. So basically, they comprise of heterogeneous group of the cells. So there are many other cells, so we can't really say them. So they basically is sometimes also known as non-cell adenoma. Yeah. So this is actually under WHO classification. So I don't want to go into that detail on this. So I leave you to read that. The next one. Okay. List the hormone secreting cell of the pituitary. We have done that many times now. You know basically the other thyrotropes, gonadotropes, corticotropes, somatotrope, and leptotrope. Okay. How are these cells stimulated? By now you should already very familiar that it actually works on the releasing hormone or inhibiting hormone, works on the G protein kappa receptors. And always remember that these tropes are basically work on GQ. This one, two of them GS, and this one is GI. It's a GI and GS, and here is actually GI. Okay, so you can remember that easily now. So of the hormone secretion. So it depends, as we say, it works through the G protein kappa receptors. What happens to this cell in this patient who has non-functional adenoma? So this cell is basically compressed, they become atrophy, and they are not able to carry out their function. Okay, so the throats will be compressed, leading to non-functional, and actually it can actually kill off the cell, so it become atrophy. Okay, so draw and then you look at the G protein couple receptors. What will the final physical response on each of these cells? So we know that each one will basically releasing each individual products. So depending the type of tropes. If thyrotropes, you're going to release TSH, gonadotrope, LH, and FSH. And then you have corticotrope, ACTH, somatotrope, growth hormones, or inhibiting growth hormones. Then you have prolactin. Okay. So I just move on. You can actually read all this detail, how it. No. Okay, I'll move on to the next one. Okay, number 12, compare the normal circumstances to that of the patient with respect to the pituitary. What would be the circulating level of pituitary hormone B in this patient? So in this patient, it will be very low level of pituitary hormone due to physical compression on the by the adenoma. Okay, and what would be the circulating level? Okay, what would be the physiological effect? Because there's no TSH, LH, FSH, ACTH, and all this is not there. So there will be no physiological effect on the organs that is being affected. Let's say thyrotropes, there will be no thyroxine being produced. Okay, if gonadotropes, there will be no LH and FSH produced. That's why she has amenorrhea, or basically irregular menses, or a very low level of LH, FSH being produced. So basically, there will be very irregular menses. And then you have corticosteroid because the glucose level will be very low. Okay, and because she's already old, probably there's not much growth. The repair and healing will be very slow. Okay. So relate to the effect of this thing in the patient. So you can see that why she has irregular menses, low FSH, LH, getting fatigued easily because of low TSH and also ACTH. She's feeling cold, low TSH, because TSH is the thyroxine is very important for thyroxine is very important basically for the function to maintain a basal metabolic rate. Okay, a certain body low temperature, and then what is the reason of the headache? Because it increased intracranial pressure because of the compression of the the adenoma, non-functional adenoma onto the brain tissue, basically on the blood vessels. So that's where there's an increase in intracranial pressure. Okay, she's and even cortisol, yeah, ACTH. And then she stood out to walk and noticed she bumps. So why? So this is looking at it is basically due to the compression of the optic chiasma. So it causes actually what we call a tunnel vision or bilateral hemianopia. The next one, doctor note that she looked pale and slow pulse rate due to low ACTH, even TSH. You can actually relate to that, ACTH and TSH. Okay. Next one. Okay, this is to explain about the bitemporal hemianopia. So our vision is from here, and it seems to cross over on the right field, cross over on the nasal field. Okay, the same thing here, the temporal field, it seems to cross over, and then on the nasal field, it actually cross over again on the optic chiasma. And below the optic chiasma is where the pituitary gland is located. Press onto the optic chiasma. So the vision here will be affected. So what the patient will not be able to see is those on the lateral side, vision will be blocked. So it cannot actually get the information, the impulse cannot travel through. So what she will going to see is like a tunnel. And anything at the side she can't see, she will easily bump into it. Yeah. Okay. So we can construct a table to show the hypothyroid hormones, their chemical nature, give the condition or under secretion of the hormone, and discuss this. Does the patient have any problem with the hypothalamic hormone? So the answer is no. Okay. Hypothalamic dysfunction is usually very rare. Okay. It can only happen due to tumor, infection, vascular problem, head trauma, even nutritional. and metabolic problems, surgery, degeneration. So you can see all these lists, but it's very will see a disrupt in body temperature, regulation, growth, weight, sodium and water balance, even milk production, even affect emotion and sleep, diabetic insipidus and other development disorders. Okay, so it's very rare to have a hypothalamic disorder in patients.
I have a question. So when they talk about hypothalamic hormones, won't they be elevated in this case, like higher than normal because of lack of negative feedback? Can you read from that perspective?
Yes, it will be actually increased. Okay, so when you do a test, basically you will see that the TRH is actually much higher. GnRH, CRH, they are all increased because there's no negative feedback. Okay, that's why it's being increased. Yeah.
So, Dr. I'm asking, can I say yes, the patient has a problem with the hypothalamic hormones because they're higher than normal?
No, when we talk about hypothalamic problems is when there is, but if still functioning normally, is able to still releasing TRH, GnRH, then it shouldn't be a problem. Okay. But when you do an inhibitory test, that means now, let's say if TRH, you give thyroxine, okay? If you give thyroxine to the patient, when you give injectable thyroxine or give thyroxine orally to the patient, what happens to the TRH when you do the test? It will decrease. So it shows that it's inhibitory. That means the thalamus is still functioning. Okay? Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay, I'll just move on. Yeah? The next one. Okay, you can construct a table, same thing as an anterior pituitary. So I didn't do this because I think it's not is you can do it on your own by now. So the question is hyperpituitarism, then you have depends on the tropes that is affected, the pituitary cells that is affected, then you will have that physiological problem. If there is a problem called leptothroadenoma, okay, that can actually increase secretion of prolactin, then the effect is there will be increase in memory development and all this, even up to a stage of milk production. Okay, or it happens onto the somatotropes. That means the growth hormone will be affected, so it can affect growth. So if there's hyperpituitary secretion of this growth hormone, the physiological effect is basically gigantation in children and acromegaly in adults. Does the patient have any of the anterior pituitary problem? No. They actually have a lot in the anterior pituitary problems. That's where you see the sign symptom in the patient. But for the posterior pituitary, the answer is no. Why? Because the stalk that the magnocellular hormones through the axon was not compressed. So it actually indicates that there is no problem compression on the pituitary stalk. Okay. So if that is the case, so I don't think there's any compression onto the blood vessel at this stage. So it started probably compression onto the pituitary cell first before actually compressing onto the blood vessels. And yet the anterior pituitary is not affected. The posterior pituitary is not affected because the hormones is still able to be secreted. Okay, so what is the justification? The patient doesn't have diabetic insipidus. Okay, and there is no problem on it doesn't much happens on the oxytocin that is being released. But the most important thing is the patient doesn't show sign of problem of ADH being secreted. Okay. Okay. The doctor decided to do more tests, so you can request the test. So the test is basically, the most important thing is to determine two things. One is you have to basically do a thorough history taking again to basically show so that there is a problem in the anterior pituitary. and also do a thorough physical examination. Then from there, you actually do endocrine function to classify either they are hypo or hyper. But in this case, you have hypofunction. And then from there, you either classify as primary, secondary, or tertiary. Yeah. So from that classification, you can actually know that it's actually primary due to pituitary hormones problem. Okay. So you can actually recognize that there is a deficiency in the hormones, and then from there you can determine the cause. So to determine the hormones deficiency, you do blood test and urine test, which is basically to check the hormone level in the blood and the urine. And then you do a CT scan or even X-ray, do a MRI to check on the organs on the pituitary to see any growth or any mass in there. As I said, biopsy, you don't do it generally for live patient because you are going to cause even more damage. You usually do it incidentally when the patient is already dead. So usually you do it or you take it during post-mortem to confirm your diagnosis. Okay. So these are the tests. You can either do stimulatory tests. Okay, you can do a stimulatory test or you can do an inhibitory test. Okay, from there, then you check the hormones again, either they are high or low, so you know where finally the location of the problems is in the anterior pituitary. Okay, so you can do the test to basically decide. Any questions so far before I go to the last one? No? Okay, I'll just move to the last one. So as we say, list the hormones that are not directly affected by pituitary adenoma. Any questions? I can't hear you. Okay. So I just move on, yeah? You already know ADH mainly for water regulation and also osmolarity of the ECF. So it regulates the volume, the blood volume, and also the osmolarity in the ECF. Okay, oxytocin mainly for milk ejection and also for during parturition or during childbirth. Okay, that's all. Any questions?
Doctor?
Yes.
This question was from a while back, but then you know that when you mentioned the cell origin for non-functioning tumor, can I say it's the non-secreting cells in the anterior pituitary, like the chromophils, because they supposedly are actually stem cells, right?
You can say that, but most of the thing they are usually the supporting cell in the central nervous system, such as the glia cells and all these astrocytes. These are all the supporting cells that actually can become tumors. Yes. And
so they are non-related secreting cells, no?
Yeah, because they are not related to the pituitary function. So basically, they are only supporting the hormone producing cells. So basically, what if they become tumor, then they are non-functional. Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay, so we have exceeded 10 minutes, 11 minutes now. So I would like to wish you good luck for your coming exam. You can't actually balik kampung, so you have to stay. The same thing, I'm not accepting any visitors because of the NCO. So basically, we just have to wish each other a Hari Raya here. Thank you. Any other questions?
Selamat Hari Raya, Doktor.
Same to you. Okay, so I will exit now.
All right. Thank you very much for that.